Good morning. I'm Ste Nadin. I work for Fujitsu. I'm the Chief Architect for our Business and Application Services division in the UK. I'm also one of our distinguished engineers. And as part of my job, I work on understanding and making sure we have efficient methods and processes to be able to deliver the pieces of work that we actually need to be able to do. I also do a lot of assurance in the business to make sure the projects that we are delivering for our customers are correct and are consistent, and we get a win-win situation both from the customer and Fujitsu as well. I've therefore been very interested in SEMAT and Essence over the last couple of years. We in Fujitsu have been using the SUP kernel before that in order to actually underpin some of the work that we've done in some of the processes in the application space. And we've been really looking at how can we exploit Essence, the kernel, as we actually go forward. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is to put some context on where we actually are and why we actually need to look at these things. We live in one of the most disruptive times that we've ever seen in the IT industry at the moment. We are seeing both customers, technology moving forward and disrupting the way that things have actually been happening, methods and techniques that we've actually used in the past. We also see that this is not going to get any better. Things are going to get worse as we move forward. We're going to see more and more disruption. We need, therefore, to introduce new methods, new processes, and new ways of working in how to actually adopt those as they come along. Now, some people embrace change, but some see a lot of fear in that change as it comes down. Cannot understand what good looks like as those new technologies and new methods are actually coming down. Therefore, it's vital we can underpin the technologies, the methods which are coming downstream, and make sure we have a common language and a common way of actually assessing what that actually works. I think the SUP kernel, the Essence kernel is the way that this can be done and gives us that underpinning and gives us that good foundation block on how that actually works. What I want to do is go through 3 examples of where we have been using it or currently using it very briefly within Fujitsu. So, the first example is a customer engagement. It was with a retailer, a pharmaceutical firm, who unfortunately I can't name directly, but a piece of work that we were doing with them and actually helping those guys actually realise the challenge that they actually had. They were in a situation where they were seeing their customers come in and demand, not ask, but actually demand that they were adopting the usage of mobile technology to actually assist with the retail experience. This was new to them. This was something that they were absolutely failing to actually do using their traditional methods on how they were actually going out and actually doing that. They were not delivering what they actually needed fast enough and understanding what they actually could do and needed to do in this space. Therefore, they realised they had to change direction. And in order to do that, they took a radical step. They actually decided to actually do a hackathon over a weekend, get in a few people, throw some ideas up in the air, and understand what was going on. Which I'm pleased to say Fujitsu won, and that is just really where the start of the story is here. Now, we saw that there was a number of challenges which needed to be done. The first was, we needed to adopt an agile working methodology. Maybe not something difficult for a number of people in this room, but for these guys, agile was something they'd not done before. Was not something that they were used to actually doing. The second was the platform, the technology, i.e. a mobile solution. How do we actually go out with technology which we were actually going on? What did that need to be? What did that need to look for? The third was the delivery window. As I mentioned, they were a retailer. They actually wanted to do this in November and December. As you know, in retail, that's quite a busy period of the year. People are slightly focused on doing other things, usually in November and December. What did that mean? Well, it meant, from a management situation, it caused a view of panic. It caused a wave of, do we really know what we're doing? Do we really want to be doing this? Is this something that we can actually achieve? So, the first challenge that we needed to do was understand how we move from that panic situation to actually make the customer warm and fuzzy, understood that where they were actually going, what they actually wanted to do. And how did we do this? What did we actually use in order to make them understand what they were doing and give them that comfort factor? Well, you won't be surprised to know, because I'm stood here at this moment in time talking to you guys, that actually we introduced SEMAT and we introduced Essence in terms of how we were going to underpin that, how we were going to actually make that happen. So, what did we do? How did we go about doing this in reality? Well, to start with, it's very important to make sure everybody's on the same page. A standard method in Agile, but also a standard method in trying to get the team working together, is before we did anything, before we actually went and did any piece of work, we insisted on making sure we had a set of workshops over a couple of days and made sure that the key guys were actually in the room. Not just the project team, but we had Fujitsu management, we had assurance, we had the customers management, we had key sponsors in there as well. We had partner organisations in helping do that too. Some of that was talking about how we do working in Agile, but we also spent a hell of a long time underpinning Essence, the alphas, and the states which were actually needed in actually doing that. So therefore we could introduce as a team, a greater team, how we could actually do it and get that common language together of what we were actually trying to do, what we were trying to achieve, and what our main goals were. Now, at this point it's probably good time to take a bit of an aside. And actually, the cards have been mentioned by a number of people already, but I think the cards are really essential in actually doing this, especially when you get guys into a room. There is something about the tactile nature of actually getting a physical piece of card or piece of paper or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a card, it could just be a piece of paper, and actually walking through it. There's some great electronic systems out there for recording what's actually going on, but in my opinion, in our practice, we actually see using the cards, getting people around the table, talking it through to start with, is the best way forward. Once you understand it, you can record it in any way, shape or form that you actually want, but having that physical conversation where people are looking at a piece of paper, if they're an expert or new to the process, actually helps focus the mind, actually focus the discussion points and so on as well. Sitting around the table, if you can. This was an example where we could sit around the table and do it. But making sure you have that conversation piece, and therefore if people have those different opinions about each of the alpha states, where you happen to be at this point, you have it there and then. You walk it through, you understand what's actually going on. Now this worked really well in this case, actually sitting there, walking it through, talking through it, actually playing with the cards and actually defining where we actually were. Right. The second important part of the engagement was we had to apply some lenses to how Essence was being applied. We had a whole programme of work that we were delivering, but within there was a number of projects, i.e. a number of ideas which needed to be formed and actually be driven forward. And therefore we had to take two lenses on how we were actually doing that. A programme lens, i.e. the whole endeavour from end to end, and a set of project lenses, i.e. each individual endeavour which we were doing in there on how we actually went about doing that. Right, so the programme lens. Well, in the programme lens view, we had to focus on how the overall team dynamic was actually going to happen. Who was involved, how they were going to do things, and what was the big picture outcomes in there. Now this fits really well in to the alphas of stakeholders, ways of working, the team, and the work that we were actually producing in this view. And what we did by this is actually working this through and really working what we were doing, it really threw out straight away the fact that we had a problem. The problem of we had a stakeholder missing. The retail guys were busy sorting out Christmas. They didn't have time to be involved in this. They were a really critical stakeholder. And by doing that, we postpone the project by 6 weeks to therefore get us to the other side of Christmas. Now, some people would see that as a bad thing because we postponed something for 6 weeks, but we got the right people involved at the right point in the project to be able to move things forward. And by using the alphas in this way, to get the whole team and the language together to understand this, it wasn't seen by senior management of, we're delaying the project. It was seen as, we are waiting to the right moment in order to engage to be successful. The second set of lenses, the project lenses. Well, this focused more on the idea of the individual project, i.e. how well was the idea defined? How well did we have those requirements? What were the problems? What was the problem that we were solving from a business point of view? You know, where was the real business value? And this, again, slightly different focus, looked at the alphas around things like requirements, opportunity and software system. And again, what this did, and anybody familiar with Agile, one of the key benefits of Agile is fail fast. Now, fail fast is great, but you still always have a problem when I'm going in and talking to boards of failure is still seen as failure. No matter how you wrap it up, there's some guys who believe if you fail, in however you fail, you have failed. Now, by using the alpha states, we were able to show in one of the project ideas, which we did fail early on, that the reason why we were not going to take it forward was because the business case, the opportunity, was not well formed. The requirements just weren't there. They didn't have any ground to actually stand on. So therefore, we were able to go in and have this discussion point on facts in terms of, this is the state this is actually in. We don't understand this. We don't have a way forward on it. Do we actually want to do this? And the answer came back, no, we don't. And actually, that's great. Because in the old world, we'd have gone ahead and kept going on this for about a year until we actually failed and gave up on it. But being able to do this and get the backing of everybody that we shouldn't was a really positive step forward. So, visualising the project states. Again, really important in this case. The project team were mainly in a room, but there was people outside of that room, really important as well. Again, using the cards. We physically pinned them up on the board. We had there, so anybody could walk in the room at any point in time and understand where we actually were. That visualisation of what was actually going on was really critical to the success. We had more than one board. We had one for each lens, i.e. we had one for the project, for the programme point of view, and we had a board for each active project we actually had running at that point in time. There's also, going back to the tactile nature of doing things, sitting down each day and talking about, well, where are we with the project? There's something satisfying about having that discussion point and physically going, yes, we've achieved something. Let's move the card from left to right and actually do something. More so than using an electronic system. Again, it adds value and actually gets people talking in the right ways of where we're actually going. So, the result. Well, the client was happy, which was good. Always positive. We were happy. We delivered something. It worked. The customer was happy. And more importantly, we'd set a foundation stone in terms of for future projects. We had now this common language of how we could discuss things, how to define things, so we didn't get back into that old language thing again of, well, how do you define the requirements in the right way, or we can't possibly do a price for you for that because the requirements aren't right. We had the common language. We had this common way now of engaging and understanding each other as we went forward. So that was the first example. The second example is more of an internal one for Fujitsu. Now, Fujitsu in the UK is great. We have a number of different methodologies, as you would expect from a large company. We have our DBMs, as we call them. We love our DBMs, our design and build methodologies. We have an infrastructure one, we have an application one, we have a service one, we have an architecture design methodology as well. We then have testing, security methodologies. We strike all of these methodologies as well. This is great, but in the real world, We don't do infrastructure projects. We don't do software projects. We don't do service projects. What we do is end-to-end solutions, which involve all of those things, all at the same time. And therefore, we need to understand how these projects are actually going forward and what states they are in. What are the gaps, and are we actually missing anything? So, it was decided we needed a new DBM called an XDBM in order to act as a container for those. As I say, we like our DBMs. And therefore, that would give that common language, that common way of actually linking these things together. And therefore, I suggested that actually we should look at SEMAT in terms of how we actually engage on that and using that as the common language to actually pull that together. Now, that caused a few challenges to start with. The first challenge was the big nasty S. Now, I come from an application background. I understand software development. I understand application integration. I have a number of colleagues who come from infrastructure backgrounds. They hate this word. They hate software. All software is the thing we stick on their boxes and break it for them. You know, it's the stuff which actually goes around and does that. And in the old world, infrastructure was great. You went and bought your tin. It turned up in a few boxes. You found a data center. You stuck your tin in that data center. You built it up and you powered it on, and everything was great. But things are changing. We now live in a world where we have private cloud, we have public cloud, we have hybrid IT, we have infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service. We have Industry 4.0, we have digitalisation of stuff, we have Internet of Things. Things are changing. And we start seeing actually that infrastructure projects are not linear waterfall builds anymore. We start seeing some of the things in the software world are actually becoming methods which are actually used in the infrastructure world. We're starting to see that we need to integrate these more. And therefore, the concept of something which would give us that common language to pin it back to our software projects as well started to gain momentum. We had now a way of actually communicating with each other, especially when we brought service into the mix as well to make sure that we had that end-to-end process. My second challenge, after the software issue disappeared, was the fact of, well, it's great, but we do all of this already. You know, in all of our methods, we do all of these things already. Well, that's not a bad thing, is it? You know, therefore, we're not actually introducing anything new. We're not changing things. All we are actually doing is using this as a common language to making sure that everybody knows what we're doing at the same points and we can link them back together again. Now, so what did we do? Well, to prove that I actually mean what I mean by cards, I thought I'd put up this rather dodgy picture of when we actually use the cards on a whiteboard rather than the nice clean version I built in Visio afterwards. We actually went down one of our methodologies, and one of our core methodologies, our customer service lifecycle methodology, and actually built that and actually went down, well, what does this mean to us? In order to reach one of these steps in the process, what would we need to do in each of the alpha states in order to drive that forward? Now, going back to the software thing, we had to reinvent the software system alpha because we had to turn it more into system, because we had to make it relevant for infrastructure solutions and so on as well. But you can do that with a fairly minor tweak. It's just a change of language. So don't get too bedded down in these things. You can make sure you can change it to actually be relevant in the language to your organisation and your customers, so therefore make sure it happens. But again, a few guys sat in the room, we easily knocked this together. We had a couple of interesting conversations about should this alpha state be here or there and so on as well. I'm sure we will change it as things go forward. But having the conversation is actually more key than actually getting it in the right place. We can change that as we go forward. So making it happen. So we're still in the process of doing this today. We're still actually driving this change. As a large organisation, change is sometimes slow and we have to embed it and we have to get these ideas through. But we're making it happen. Now, what it actually means in practice is we're changing the way we do checklists. So before, from a governance point of view, all of our methods were linked to, at this stage of a project, you will have created these assets. These assets would be things like high-level designs, low-level designs, risk plans, cost models, all of those things, traditional IT type pieces of assets. The problem with those things is you can create them, but does it actually tell you where you actually are with your project? Yes, so you've created a document, but surely what's in that document is more important than the fact that you've actually created a document. So actually what we've moved to is understanding and actually analysing now, based on, well, what is the state of these things? Have we actually realised each of these states? Where have we moved to? And that actually has opened up a lot of freedom as well, because it means we're not just creating assets for the sake of creating assets. If you don't need to create one of these things, well, you don't need to, because as long as you're describing it somewhere else, it doesn't matter. Right, third example. Now this is something that we are currently at the start of in our engagement. Now Fujitsu is a large organisation. We have 165,000 people working for us, over most countries in the world, in most industries in the world, doing some things which even I don't understand that we're doing in technology spaces which are very foreign to me. Now this isn't a boast, this is an issue, because how do we get all of those people working and talking in the same language in the same ways, especially when their language isn't the same language in the first place anyway? Well, the reason where we were is we had loads of processes. We have loads of methods. We love processes and methods. We have millions of them. But each of these were built for the local environment each of the companies actually was trading in. Because Fujitsu had grown from acquisitions and mergers of best-of-breed companies from across the world to come together into a single brand. But these were very governed by making sure they worked for the local geography they were in and the local industries that they were actually attacking. The problem is, most of our customers now want a global delivery. They want things to work from a global point of view. In fact, a number of our customers now aren't even based in a single geography. As they move into the cloud, as new providers come together, they aren't geography bound at all. They just sit in the cloud somewhere. And therefore we have to adopt to that model. Now, that means we have two ways forward. Option one is we can create a super process, a super method, and therefore want to govern them all. So therefore we can actually do that, create one and make everybody follow those single methods across the piece. Or we can do something different. Now, my view is certainly you can't create a super method. It won't work for you. It may work in certain situations, but it would make you too rigid. It would fail as a business model going forward. So funnily enough, we're looking at doing something different. And guess what that is? It's basically to introduce the Essence kernel. So therefore, we've got that common language. We can use that as that common way of communicating with each other. So it's fine still for different bits of the business to use their own methods where they need to be done. But by pinning them back into the kernel, understanding at what points of each of those processes line up to a given alpha state, we can make sure our delivery fits together. We can understand where we get gaps. We can understand how we resolve those. And therefore we have a way forward. We're very early doors in this. This is something we are really attacking at the moment. So, a couple of takeaways from me. The first one being practice the alphas offline. Actually having that physical conversation, actually sitting down with the cards. Doesn't matter how experienced you think you are or not, actually that tactile way of doing things actually does drive results. The second one is use lenses. Don't be scared of applying certain lenses based on the situation to what you're actually doing at what points in time. And the third is don't limit yourself just because the S in SEMAT talks about software to just using it in software solutions. It can equally work well in the end-to-end solution out there as well. Thank you.
defining questions, comments?
Scared everybody into silence.
Thanks for your very nice presentation. It's very helpful and useful. I think like the previous speaker, did I hear you say that you essentially use the kernel and basically build your own things on top of that, or did you use actual practices and libraries?
So we have a history of using practices as well. We are currently redefining some of those practices into the Essence kernel and actually adopting those forward. And we're driving that change constantly. We have got practices out there today which we actually use and patterns for usage, and we have linked those into methods as well. So we have got some history of that. We have got that in electronic systems as well to actually drive some of those change and manage some of those things as well and help our users. Where we are though is trying to now move forward, adapt Essence more to simplify some of that language. That is where we have to drive that change and drive that language forward. Any more? Thank you.